Welcome to a special edition of Locked On Astros. I've got local sports anchor Ari Alexander from KPRC Channel 2 to talk about covering the Houston Astros, what it's like being in the business here in Houston, and where he thinks the Astros are headed in 2023.
Alvarez hits a high drive center field. Beer leans back. This game is turned upside down. There's the runner. Fly ball down the right field line. Tucker comes on. Kyle Tucker. This time they finish the job.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Astros, your daily Astros podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric the Man Huysman and Brett Htown Wheelhouse Chancey.
We are Locked On Houston Astros, and we're your daily Astros podcast. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Htown Wheelhouse. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find the show at Locked On Astros on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Remember, we're your team every single day. I've got a special guest with me today, local sports anchor and dubbed by other local media as one of the hardest working men in Houston sports. Ari Alexander, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, definitely. So, Ari, tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter.
Yeah, it's Ari A1 Alexander. You can also find me at KPRC2 Ari. But typically, for the most part, it's Ari. It's Ari Alexander, but the L is the number one. There's a guy who is at Ari Alexander, I think, in Indonesia, and he won't give me his account for any less than $600. So I've just had to roll with it.
Oh, wow, man, your name is out there for ransom.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. Whenever the whole website, the .com thing started, I remember there was an individual, I think in Florida, that bought a bunch of NFL players' names, like WarrenSapp.com, KeyshawnJohnson.com, and these players were like, I can't start websites with my name on it. And he's like, yeah, you can, for $500 a piece. And apparently this guy made a pretty good chunk of change doing that. He went and bought all these domains with the players' actual names because that was kind of a dawn of a new age. Of course, that's really kind of ages ago. Now we're talking to robots and we have holograms showing up as concerts. So times are a little bit changed. You know, Ari, you've been with KPRC since 2019. So you've been here in Houston, where Houston, for the most part, growing up, I know for our listeners, we would say for years Houston was a football town, and you know the Texans still have a large fan base. I know they've had some tumultuous years. The Rockets have the history of the 2 NBA titles in the 90s. I remember that when I was in college. But really, it's become a baseball town. Tell us how you got started here, what it's been kind of like with KPRC and with the Astros being as successful as they are.
Well, it's been interesting because the first thing I did really was Texans. I got here in July of 2019, and obviously the Astros were in the middle of another season where they went to the World Series, and they were coming off obviously the 27 championship and another good year in 2018 where they went to the ALCS. And so there was the buzz around the Astros, but this was James Harden was here. The Texans still had J.J. Watt, Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, and so there were three very good sports teams that I would say 2 of the 3 had a shot at a championship. I don't think anyone really believed the Texans were a real championship team, but that year they were up 24-0 on the Chiefs before disaster, and they ended up having a good season. The Rockets had a good season before they lost to the Lakers in the playoffs, and then obviously the Astros made it to the World Series yet again in 2019. And so it was kind of like a utopia of every team is good, or every team, at least if you're a fan, gives you the hope that they can win a championship or come close. And then it all kind of came crashing down for everyone except for the Astros. And you obviously got to give them credit that they've been a dynasty, that you can expect them to definitely make the playoffs every year and to compete for a World Series championship. And that's something, if you're a fan of other teams, I think you take for granted. Like, I'm a Mets fan, and you just cannot rely on them to compete for a championship every year. Now you sort of expect it with the payroll that they have in Steve Cohen. But for the Astros, since 2017, or even go back to 2015 when they started to be good, you can rely on them to have a legitimate shot at the championship. It's again this way this year. Next year, I think that they bring back most of this team, and you should be able to, again, in 2024, unless there's a massive collapse this year, rely on the Astros to, again, compete for a championship. And so, when everyone talks about the golden era of Astros baseball, It really is. And I think for Astros fans who have suffered through the tanking years and suffered through all the years, the Bagwell, Biggio, Berkman years, where they had good years and they had great years and they made it to a World Series. This is on another level, seeing that not only can you make a World Series, you've won 2, you're almost expected to win one every year.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a mind shift. That is a mind shift, a just change of perspective. Because I remember the 05, the 04, the 05 years when they literally were the team that had, I think, the worst batting average, the worst offense to make a World Series against the White Sox. And it was, I guess, appropriate statistically that they would get swept by the White Sox because the White Sox didn't beat the socks off them, not to use a pun. They won those games, were very low scoring games. It was a very kind of mediocre World Series. You didn't have any walk-offs. You didn't have like the World Series Game 5 like in 2017. But I even harken back to the late 90s. I remember when we picked up Randy Johnson. Yeah. And we had this rental of we had the big unit in town, and he was going to take us to the World Series. And gosh dang it, we didn't run into the Padres and Kevin Brown and Tony Gwynn. I mean, that series was supposed to go our way, go back to 86 when all the Mets, being a Mets fan, here's the Mets tie, is I've heard every one of those guys say, we are so glad we won in Game 6 because if we would have gone to Game 7, we would have faced Mike Scott and he probably would have no-hit us. Yeah, that's how much fear someone like Mike Scott struck in the heart of fans. So you're a New York Mets guy. Are you from New York originally?
Sort of. So I was born in Ukraine originally. I grew up in Iowa, but then a lot of my relatives live in Brooklyn. So I would spend every summer in Brooklyn. And the first game I ever went to was a Mets game. So I've been a Mets fan since I was 8 years old. Went to a Mets Expos game, and Mike Piazza was my favorite player growing up, and then David Wright, and then obviously now the more recent. I pitched, growing up, and so I went to the more recent. The Matt Harveys and Jacob deGroms were more of my favorite players.
Yeah, so you were probably the Matt Harvey fan when he was called the Dark Knight, or
he had the Batman. He's my favorite player. He is. Yeah, I'm a big Matt Harvey fan. Sad to see him retire from baseball and kind of what happened, but there's going to be a great 30 for 30 made about Matt Harvey here in 5-10 years or so.
Yeah, definitely. And so let me ask you about that because, we hear a lot of chirping from Yankees fans. The Yankees have the 27 rings, and they will remind you of that in any conversation you have. You could be talking about spaghetti. You could be talking about Caesar salad or a car wash, and they'll bring up 27 rings. They'll work that into the conversation. And I know being a Mets fan has kind of been a long-suffering thing for you guys as well. Since 86, when y'all won the World Series, you had guys like Mookie Wilson, Gary Carter, Keith Hernandez, all the great Mets players from the 80s that I loved having their baseball cards because they had value and worth. But since then, between now and then, Steve Cohen's kind of been a breath of fresh air for Mets fans. What are Mets fans really feeling about this club? Like, they went out and spent all this money, and I think they're starting to play a little bit better. I know they did just get swept recently this last week by the Blue Jays before the Blue Jays had Houston come up. But what is the feeling? Is the feeling like, okay, we're going to spend this money, maybe we won't get there this year, but is there hope, or is it kind of this perpetual pessimism as being a Mets fan?
It's a mix right now. I mean, I think the big storyline that's been going on for the past month with them, and it's something that the Astros have been dealing with to a lesser degree, is playing the rookies. The Mets they call them the baby Mets. They have a third baseman, Brett Beatty. It's actually from Austin, Texas, who finally is starting to get everyday playing time over Eduardo Escobar, who is on a bigger contract, right? Francisco Alvarez, the former number 1 overall prospect in baseball, has been great at catcher. He, nearly won Rookie of the Month in May, and he was kind of trying to fight for playing time. And they recently DFA'd Tomas Nido to clear a spot for him. But then Omar Narvaez is now back from injury and in the lineup. So again, how much do you play this guy who is a potential Rookie of the Year in the National League? And he's battling for playing time over a guy that they just signed. They weren't ready. They didn't do the thing the Astros did where they immediately turned over shortstop to Jeremy Pena after Correa. They were not ready to give Francisco Alvarez the catcher spot this year, and they went out and signed Omar Narvaez. And then they have the third baby Met is Mark Vientos, who's kind of hard to find a defensive spot for him. First base, third base, not great on D. He's a hitter. And right now at DH, they have this split. They have Daniel Vogelback, who they traded for last year, and he has been awful, and he doesn't swing the bat. And everyone wants Vientos to play, and he's been getting inconsistent playing time. So Vientos is almost like Yainer Diaz, where you have this very good hitting prospect. You're not necessarily sure about his defense, although I know Diaz grades out much better defensively than Vientos does. But he needs to be in the lineup to get consistent at bats because he can hit. And that's something that the Astros have seen or fans have been frustrated about with Diaz. And then the Mets fans parallel have that same frustration about Vientos. And so now every day when they set a lineup, every team's fans worries about the lineup. It's the count of how many baby Mets are in the lineup, 1, 2, or 3. And if you get less than 2, then the fans get upset. And so that's what's been looking for every day. Same with, the Astros come out with the lineup and is Myers in, is Julks in, is Chaz in, is Yainer in, is Yainer playing first? And so I think these fan bases all go through the same thing. But I do think there's a little bit more trust from the fan base in the Astros because whatever complaints fans have had over the past 5 or 6 years, the result has been 4 World Series trips and 2 titles.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't necessarily give comfort to a lot of people. And here in the next segment, I want to talk about some of the Astros lineup construction, the state of the Astros, what you think about Diaz and Maldonado thing and things like that. But before that, we want to talk about Birddogs. And let me tell you, Birddogs is these shorts that I have from Birddogs. I've never had anything more comfortable than the shorts. They're designed to fit slimmer. They feel great. The material is amazing. If I were you, I would go ahead and grab these shorts with the liner in them. I'm telling you, I haven't felt better in a pair of shorts. Like, I feel like in these shorts, they're so nice. I could literally go out on a date with these shorts. I could go to a golf tournament. I could go to a business meeting and people be like, man, what are those? Like, they're Birddog. They use anti-shrink, sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry. And I can tell you this, look, I'm not being braggadocious, but I even look good in them. And I know you will look good in them as well. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB, enter the promo code LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. The birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB for your free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off, we promise you. Now, you probably will have to at some point, but I'm telling you, they are that comfortable. So check out Birddogs. They are definitely top of the line. And if you are listening to the show on Friday, you will have to check out the Astros. On Saturday, they play the Guardians at 5:10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the Astros hometown broadcast, sparking forward, have you locked in with the Sirius XM app. Search the SXM app and search Astros. And eventually you'll be able to find all Locked On Astros podcasts and episodes on the Sirius XM. So, Ari, you bring up some interesting things because it seems like, because I'm so involved in social media, and sometimes I wish I wasn't, but it's a necessary evil in my life because I've got to keep up with the times. And it's so funny. You've got your Facebook faction and you got your Twitter faction. Facebook people think that Twitter people aren't smart, and Twitter people think that Facebook people aren't smart. And there's these little wars. Oh, you're not on Insta, whatever kind of thing, the younger generation. But we see all this talk about, lineup construction. And earlier in this week, the Astros just laid it on the Toronto Blue Jays in the first game of their series. Yainer Diaz comes up with 4 hits. And then the next day, the lineup came out on Tuesday, and we see that Dusty Baker's sitting Yainer Diaz, just infuriating the fan base. And I love Jeremy Brennan from the radio from 94.5. I'm sorry, 97.5 ESPN. He always puts out a tweet now, what's wrong with Dusty's lineup? Almost like stoking the fires of division. Jeremy is, twisting, poking the bear a little bit. But what is your take on this lineup construction? Do the Astros fans possibly make too much about who's hitting where, how many games are they playing, or does someone like Diaz simply need to be playing more?
It's a mix of both. Obviously, everyone is not going to necessarily agree with the lineup unless you're going out and getting a bunch of runs every game. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Baseball is hard. Guys are comfortable in different spots. Jeremy Pena got all this hate from the analytic community during the playoffs. Like, why are you batting a guy with a 290 on base percentage second? and then he goes out and wins World Series MVP because he feels comfortable in that spot. I've talked to Dusty about this. Jeremy wants to be in the 2 spot. Dusty would maybe rather have Michael Brantley in the 2 spot. Michael Brantley is not currently available. So right now you put a guy who wants to be in the 2 spot, feels comfortable in the 2 spot, and that lineup construction works for you, even if the analytic community doesn't agree with it. So you keep paying you in there until Michael Brantley is available and you can move Jeremy down to 6th or 7th. The Maldonado versus Yainer Diaz is going to be one of the more interesting subplots of the season. You do need to play Yainer Diaz. Martin Maldonado is signed through this year. There is no indication that the Astros will re-sign him after this year. There's also no indication that he's going to retire. So he's likely going to be playing somewhere else, and the Astros have all of these catchers coming up. You don't necessarily need Martin Maldonado in 2024. They picked up his option vested last year where he played more than 90 games, and he is a luxury on this team. If you didn't have Maldonado, you could throw out Yainer Diaz, have Cesar Salazar as your backup, potentially have Corey Lee, and then there's Luke Berryhill and all these other guys coming up. So their system is healthy when it comes to the catcher position, and there's a ton of catchers to be had, backup catchers. Look at, Mets are a good example. They just DFA'd Tomas Nido. You can go get Tomas Nido for a lower level prospect, and he is a perfectly adequate backup MLB catcher. Is he going to hit a lot? No. But is he good with the staff? He's fine, right? So that's a guy you can go get. Tucker Barnhart was available on the free agent market for fairly cheap this year. He's on the Cubs now, but the Astros could have went and got him. And I had heard from some sources close to Tucker Barnhart, he would have loved to play for the Astros and been a complimentary piece on that team. And so catching is out there. You can find a backup catcher. It's not that hard. It's just how comfortable do you feel with Yainer Diaz immediately taking the reins? And it's different at different spots. Last year, the Astros went all in on Pena at shortstop. Shortstop is obviously an extremely important position, and you lost Carlos Correa, who is an all MLB level player, a $300 million level player, and you just said, all right, we're not paying you. We're going to put this rookie in. And it obviously worked out great.
Right.
And this year you have a bridge. You have Maldonado, who is excellent with the pitching staff, who is the clubhouse leader when it comes to the offense and generally, right? I would say Maldonado is probably the overall clubhouse leader. And then the second tier is the Hector Neris's, the Yordan Alvarez, Alex Bregmans of the world are below that. But I think that the guy that they go to on final say type of matters that would have been Carlos Correa a few years ago is now Martin Maldonado. And so he has so much respect from the clubhouse. He has so much respect from Dusty. I think that he probably would have played less earlier this season if the Astros hadn't started slow, because Dusty wants his best defensive construction out there, and that includes the pitch calling and just the little things that Maldonado provides. I think once you see the Astros start to roll a little bit, maybe they eventually overtake the Rangers in the division, stretch that lead, then you'll start to see more Yainer Diaz. You'll start to see more rest days for Maldonado. I just think that they didn't want to get too far behind in the division, and so your best lineup construction, at least according to Dusty, has Martin Maldonado in it.
And, that's something that I've tried to explain, and, something I've learned, I'm sure this just in life. When someone has their mind made up, there's not a whole lot you can do to change it, except present your side of the story and hope that they hear a little bit of what you're saying. From all the professionals, from all the pitchers that we have talked to Luke Berryhill. I've actually talked to Corey Lee about this, just, off the record on the side. Talked to Jason Bell with the Astros, talked to Elvis Rodriguez with their Dominican Summer League. And they all say the same thing. Like, Ryan Stanek. I mean, Martin Maldonado puts in more effort and more study and more like grueling work than they've seen of any catcher in their career. And a lot of people can't get past the stats, and the stats are hard to ignore. The lack of plate presence that he has, right? The diminishing defensive abilities that he's shown because of his age. But at the same time, when you tell me, because you've been in the clubhouse, you've interviewed these players, you've talked to them, and so you have a pulse. You have a hand literally on the pulse of the club, and you just confirmed to me what I've been told by players is that he is the leader of the clubhouse. And you don't just rip the leader from his leadership position because you have a lot of people that can show you on a spreadsheet why this guy should be out there versus this guy. Because I think baseball a lot of times, well, I know it is. It's more mental a lot of times than it is physical. It's not the guys, it's not Abreu's lack of ability to hit. We know Jose Abreu can hit. We know Jose Abreu can hit for power. But it's been, I think, a big shift for him. I think mentally it's just been a struggle. And he's just starting to get comfortable in the clubhouse. So he's starting to come around on this team. And so lineup construction, I love Bregman hitting fourth. We on the show, Eric even said it. He goes, they need to put Bregman at cleanup. And what do you know? He's been hitting cleanup, and he's been the old Alex Bregman. That's what I love about this team. So looking at the pitchers that are down, the injuries we have, Altuve kind of back and forth. In the next segment, in the last segment, I'm gonna get your take on where you think this Astros team is gonna go. Who maybe some names you think that are out there for free agency, and then maybe give us a couple stories that you've got for us. Maybe something you can share with us that you've had, fun interactions with the players. But before we do that, I want to talk about Gametime. Now, look, a lot of y'all out there, you're like, I've got a plan next month. You're looking at the calendar in June and you're trying to figure out which game in July you can go to because you got to get tickets because they'll sell out fast. Well, you know what? Actually, with Gametime, you can wait till the day of. This is a great app. You download it. It's easy to use. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. And I literally did this here. I walked up to a game and I wanted to get tickets. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to check my Gametime app. I opened it up. I sat section 109, row 12, seat 5 for $45. I'm telling you, I was like, why would I have paid full price for this ticket? Why would I have paid an overcharge? And what's cool is Gametime says this. If you have the Gametime app and you find a ticket in the same section, in the same row on a different app, and it's cheaper, they'll discount you. They'll give you back 110% the difference. So they'll put that money back into your account and you'll have more money to go to not just Astros games, concerts. If you have someone that you like likes the improv or ballet, whatever you like, Gametime is there. No need to plan, no need to fumble through your phone or your purse or whatever you got. Just 2 clicks, boom, purchase the ticket. Go to Gametime today. Use a promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. And please do not forget that on Saturday, the Astros play the Cleveland Guardians at 5:10 Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the Astros hometown broadcast with the Sirius XM app. Search Astros. That's great. Man, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and sitting down with me. We're going to be airing this over the weekend on Saturday. So look, if you guys do not watch local news in Houston, go over to KPRC, check out Ari's stuff. You even do a Sports Sunday show, correct?
Yep, 10:30 on Sundays on KPRC. We have a KPRC 2 Plus app that you can download on your phone that's free, that you can stream stuff. We have extra streaming shows, usually during the playoffs, World Series, that'll go right before the game. We did one I was at the NFL draft a little while ago. We did a little features on this. We have this local jeweler who does all the huge chains for the players of the draft.
Cool.
Frost & Co. did a sit-down interview with Texas star running back Bijan Robinson. So we'll do little things like that here and there. But for the most part, 10:30 Sports Sunday, we get to explore, with the 30 minutes longer topics than we would on a 2-3 minutes on the news every night. So this week we just talked about Jeremy's Pena's Pals, where he invited some Uvalde survivors, and he's doing really good stuff with the community every Friday home game. And Bregman has Bregman Cares. I know Reagan and his wife will be out at there's a dodgeball tournament coming up where they'll raise some money for charity. And so a lot of the times these guys will go out and they go out and do good work for the community. You'll see Jordan and Altuve and Pena and Bregman and all these guys out in the community doing good work. Lance McCullers is another guy that does quite with that. And so, you get to know these guys that they care about the community. They care about being good for the fans. And, sometimes people take that for granted, and I yell at the TV plenty at the Mets. But, these guys are always trying, and they're not above criticism. It's okay to criticize their game and break down why this guy's not doing well or doing better or whatever. But, sometimes you do got to take a step back and go, hey, these are real people that are trying to live their dream, and baseball's hard and they're working at it. And if they don't succeed, then they don't succeed. But they are people that are trying to make the best of their living.
No, yeah, definitely. Once again, I appreciate you joining the show. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Astros. Ari, thank you for taking the time out. This has been a great bonus edition of Locked On Astros. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Ari on Twitter. I'm sure interact with me. See you at a game, say hi. Get a picture with them. Say, I saw you on Locked On Astros. Now you're not just famous, you're infamous. That's right. The hardest working man in Houston sports, Ari Alexander. I'm Htown Wheelhouse with Locked On Astros. Remember, we're your team every day. Go Stros.